NRx Pharmaceuticals, a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company, announced the FDA has granted Fast Track designation to NRX-100 for the treatment of suicidal ideation in patients with depression, including bipolar depression. And with me is the CEO, John Javitt, to explain the significance of this. So this is a big deal. Can you elaborate on exactly what this means for the company?
Well, not only for the company, but really for the 13 million Americans who contemplate suicide every year, for the 1.5 million Americans who attempt suicide every year, for the Americans who die of suicide every 11 minutes. This is a huge development because FDA has expanded the indication under our Fast Track designation from bipolar depression, which is about 10% of people who have depression, to the whole diagnostic category of depression, including bipolar depression. So it's important from that perspective, but it's even more important from a regulatory perspective, in that in order to issue the Fast Track designation, FDA had to come to the conclusion that we address an unmet medical need. And that same conclusion, addressing an unmet medical need, is one of the requirements to qualify for the Commissioner's National Priority Voucher Program, which provides a fast path to approval of drugs that address a current public health crisis. So in this regulatory determination, FDA has made that critical scientific judgment.
So what is next then for NRX and in your application process?
Well, we're continuing to submit the data that's required for new drug approval. We already have what's called an ANDA, an abbreviated new drug approval, on file that might give us the ability to sell ketamine as a generic drug. But what we really need to be able to do is to sell it with a label on it that says that this drug can be used to treat suicidal depression, because without that label, it can still be used under practice of medicine, and people can pay cash and be treated legally. But people who rely on health insurance generally can't get insurance coverage for a drug that's not being used for its labeled indication.
Okay.
So we're continuing to submit data in support of that new drug application. This week, we're going to have our draft labeling completed. Now that we have the Fast Track in place, we're able to submit draft labeling that aligns with the Fast Track designation. And we eagerly await the FDA's decision on whether we're going to be one of the first 5 priority vouchers that get awarded this year.
What does the Fast Track mean in terms of time? So say best case scenario, when might this be able to be prescribed? Mm-hmm. And if you weren't on Fast Track, how long would it have taken?
Typically, an FDA review cycle takes about a year, and Fast Track doesn't by itself give you priority review, but Fast Track qualifies you to apply for priority review. That cuts that review time approximately in half. Mm. So the answer to the broader question you asked is, when do we think this drug will be available for patients? And we expect it'll be available for patients in 2026, hopefully in the very early part of 2026.
And you mentioned 10 million people suffer from this. So this would be an amazing thing to be able to help them. And that's quite a large market for NRX as well.
Well, it's a large market for NRX, but more importantly, you're talking about a public health crisis. You're talking about a disease that kills an American every 11 minutes. And for the first time in human history, we're understanding suicidal depression at the level of biology, at the level of neurochemistry. You know, we're long since past the scene in Hamlet where he's saying to be or not to be and contemplating his own suicide. And we're understanding that this is a switch in the brain. Uh, I lost my best friend to this disease, and I remember sitting with his daughter the night before his funeral, saying, if your dad had had a short circuit in his heart and died from it, this would be a terrible day. What you need to understand, what we all need to understand, is that he had a short circuit in his brain and had no more control over what happened to him than if he had died of a heart attack. And in 2009, when I was saying that, the science was just beginning to emerge from the mists. Well, it's now 2025, and we understand the science at an exquisite level. We understand that suicidal depression is in many ways a loss of neuroplasticity within the brain, of the ability of brain cells to make and form and sever new connections in a dynamic way, and that ketamine, other neuroplastic drugs, sometimes people call them psychedelic drugs, transcranial magnetic stimulation, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, are all incredibly promising technologies that restore neuroplasticity in the brain and can make this disease every bit as treatable as a case of pneumonia.
Well, absolutely fascinating. The world appreciates scientists like you that are solving some of the biggest issues that humanity has. And please, again, keep us up to date as you go through this fast track process, and let us know how things are proceeding along.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.